Good evening. You are joining Lynn Sharif, me, the Wise Wife, for the Wise Wife radio program. I am so excited to have you here. We're live on Instagram, and very soon we're going to be live on Facebook. You can also catch us at IntellectualRadio.com. But I'm going to start out by telling you, why am I here? Why am I sitting in this seat? I have been married to my second husband for 22 years. We've been together for 24. We have what we call a crock pot. You may recognize the term blended family, but we don't consider our family to be blended. We call it more of a crock pot because blend, you hit a button and then all of a sudden everything is there. But a crock pot, it takes time. It takes time to develop. It takes time to cook. So we say that we have a crock pot family. We now have 3 grown children, and we're blessed to have our very first grandchild, a 9-month-old boy. So between both of our previous marriages, and we, by the way, call our marriage the mob marriage. You can get in, but you're not getting out. We have endured many of the things that have fractured and ended marriages. Really, take your pick, all of the things. And when I got married the first time, I was in my early 20s. I met my first husband when I was 17 years old. I was a baby. And quite frankly, I was in over my head, but I didn't know it. I just thought you get into it, you love each other, and that it works. But that is not the case. I was still in college when we met, and we went to a few premarital classes, few sessions, but I was really unprepared for when life got real. When it got real, it got very real. And while there are some things that happened in the marriage that I regret, I never say that I regret being married the first time, because I gave birth to a wonderful son who is the joy of my life. He is an adult. And I always say that the wings that you spend your whole child's when you're raising your children, you're developing their wings. So I always like to say that his wings work. His wings work. He is out there, he is flying, and I ain't got to put nothing on the rent. He is making his way in the world. So it's a beautiful thing. But marriage is really challenging. And like me, when I was in my 30s, most folks are just navigating it on their own. They want it to be successful, but you run into times when it just isn't successful. And so that is what brings me here. The other thing that brings me here is that back in the 90s in Chicago, there was a program called Let's Talk About Marriage and the Family. It was, I don't know if anybody remembers it. If you're in the chat, drop in there if you remember that program, Let's Talk About Marriage and the Family. And it was hosted by 2 pastors. One has gone on to be with the Lord, but I would be in my car every day because they would invite people to call in and they would answer questions. And that forum is greatly missed. And so I started talking to married women a few years ago. So for about maybe almost 2 years, I would do a short segment on Sundays called Sunday Soul Chat. But then that season ended. But while that season ended, I still felt a pull to help people. But really, I ignored it. I just ignored it because I didn't, I just didn't want to be out in the public eye. I would do it. I would certainly still mentor and talk to wives and women, but I did it just personally. But the pull was still there. And then the other big reason why I stopped talking to folks is that There were days when my own marriage was struggling. And because my own marriage was struggling, I'm thinking, who am I to be talking to somebody else about their marriage if my own marriage is struggling? And the other thing, I have a faith life, and I believe that God ordained marriage. That may not be where you're coming from, but that is where I'm coming from. I believe that God ordained marriage, and I want to have the marriage that God said that we could have. But oftentimes I would hear couples in ministry say, well, we don't argue. Our life is blissful. We don't argue. And that was not my story. We've come to call our conversations intense fellowship. But it's important to know, if you're out there, that if you are experiencing a season of conflict, it doesn't mean that you've made a mistake. It doesn't mean that you're not meant for each other. You are going to have conflict. It's a natural part of the relationship process. And I want to tell you, I'm not a licensed therapist. We will have a therapist that will be joining us a little bit later, but I'm not a licensed therapist. So really, what I've gathered over the years is a wisdom that has come from what I call crash and learn, the crash and learn method. I didn't always get it right. And so the other stark reality about my own life and my own marriage is that there were seasons that I didn't want to work on it. I was just on cruise control. But one thing that has always remained is that although there were days when my husband stomped on my last nerve, and I'm sure that I stomped on his, I could not imagine my life without him. And we've done a lot of growing over these 24 years. And I always say that we are not perfect, but we have been purposefully pursuing a happy marriage. So who out there am I talking to? Who am I talking to? The first person or the first set of people that I'm talking to are the folks that if your marriage is in bad shape, the question is, do you want to be healed? It's a simple question. It comes from the Bible. Jesus asked that question of someone who was in need of healing. And all that simple question requires is a simple answer. I don't need excuses. I don't need, well, this, well, that. It's a simple question. Do you want to be healed? And if that is the case, then you're who I'm talking to. The second set of people that I'm talking to are people who, one, believe it can happen, but two, you're willing to work for it. You're willing to work for it. And understand that working for it, sometimes you may just have to sit back and take a breath, but you are willing to do the things that are necessary to get your marriage where you want it to be. And then the last set of people that I'm talking to are those that believe that it can happen. You believe that it can happen. So oftentimes, Christian people, you believe that God parted the Red Sea. Yeah, it happened. You believe that Jesus turned water to wine. It happened. But when it comes to your marriage, you're like, no, this is too hard. He can't do it. He can't do it. So you have to want to be healed. You have to be willing to work for it. And then last, you have to believe that it can happen. So say you're on the fence. Say you're on the fence. You're not sure. You don't know if you have the energy or the interest in fighting for your marriage. Then let me give you these three things. Well, no, I don't have three things. I have more things. Let me give you these things to consider. If you are married and you're really thinking, I'm not really sure I want to do this, I want to give you some considerations because I've been down this road. I've been down the divorce road. I've been down there and it's not pretty. So if you are not able to get along with your spouse right now, if you can't come to an agreement on how to raise the kids, for instance, why do you think that it's going to somehow be easier once you're divorced? I can give you part of the answer. When you're in pain, when things are not working, and trust me, when marriage is going through a lot, it is hell. It feels like hell. And it's like you just want to find the closest exit. If I can just get off, it'll be better. It'll be better. But I'm here to tell you that it may not be better. And I want you to consider that. And so for the parents out there, are you prepared to spend half of your time with your children? You got little kids, you got holidays, you have special occasions, you got the day-to-day joys and pains of being with your kids. That time is going to be split in half forever. I have been divorced for over 20 years. But prior to the pandemic, we had Thanksgiving dinner, and my son, of course, has to split his time between my family and between his dad's family. And we had to cut everything short because he had to leave to go to visit his dad's family. That's his family too. So think about that. Do you really want to only see your kids half the time? Men, imagine that you're pulling up to pick up your son and you see him playing catch with another dude. Oof, that's hard. Ladies, your ex, he is getting serious with a woman. You saw her, you met her, you ain't feeling her at all. Well, guess what? You can do nothing about it. Nothing. Whatever happens over there stays over there. It's over there. You have no control over it. And those people who do try to exercise control, we all know them. Divorced couples who are going through mad, ridiculous drama. I'm telling you, I've been there. The level of craziness that went on through the divorce, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And I want to save you from that, if at all possible, just by telling you that there is another road. You may think you won't care, but trust me, you'll care. So number 4, if you still find yourself intensely angry with your spouse about something or another, you're not done. You are not done. Because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. So think about this. Think about someone who's been divorced for a really long time. There really is probably very little that their ex-spouse could do that really just fires them up. That's the indifference. That's the opposite of love. But if you still find yourself so angry, understand that you're not over each other, or you may not be over your spouse. So all of that emotion, you're going to carry it right with you. You're going to carry it right with you. When you're indifferent, they can't make you that angry. The last thing is the loss of your family and your friends, potential loss of your family and friends. So when you have those couple friends, those friends may feel the need to side with one or the other. Think about that. They may feel like they have to choose between you and your ex. And your family is also going to be impacted. Divorce does not just include you and your spouse and your kids. It's your whole extended family. So if you want to picture two wooden boards that are glued together, when you pull those apart, it doesn't pull apart cleanly. Think about it. There's some fracturing. It's not a clean break. One piece is still going to be glued to the other. There's going to be a hole there because it's not a clean break. It's never clean. So just something to consider if you're really on the fence. So I've talked about the people that I am here to talk to, but let me also talk about the people that I'm not talking to. I am not possibly able to help you if you are married to a fool. What is a fool, Lynn Sharif? So this term fool or foolish or some other of that phrasing is mentioned over 300 times in the Bible. I have to think that if it's mentioned that many times, somebody has got to be married to a fool. So a fool, the actual definition, is one who is thoughtless, self-centered, not even trying to mature or grow. Someone who is not exercising reason. That is a fool. Someone who pursues a course that is contrary to wisdom. Every marriage, unfortunately, is not going to be saved. So I'm not here to give you this Pollyanna belief that no matter what, your marriage can be saved. It's not always possible. I'm also not talking to those people who are not really interested in seeking wise counsel. Because, again, we're going to talk about counseling in just a minute, and there are a lot of people who are out there like that. If you are not open to even hearing another point of view, you really might be doomed to repeat doing what you always do and end up potentially divorced. So if you're willing to listen, I'm willing to talk. The last group of people that I'm not really talking to are those that are not interested in being really what I call radically honest with themselves or with their spouse. You got to get naked with yourself and with your spouse. And we're going to elaborate on radical honesty on another show. But if you're not willing to admit what the problems are or the problems that you see, if you're in denial, it's hard to help somebody who's in complete denial about where their marriage is. So we are going to be bringing on a licensed counselor, but I want to talk to you about my own experience with counseling. I promise you that in the 22 years that I have been married, if I did not have a counselor, I would have been divorced a bunch of times. I would have been divorced a bunch of times. And we sought the counselor that we currently have because, understand, I still go for checkups from time to time. But we had really just gotten to a major impasse. I mean, we had relocated. It was a lot going on. And we ended up finding her. And it was to go through counseling and to dig up a lot of the things that were issues was painful at times. There were times that I called myself in the hot seat. I would be mad because it's hard to face the not so pretty parts of yourself. Because see, that's really what marriage is. Marriage is a mirror. marriage is a mirror, and you see a reflection of yourself, and you can get defensive. So when I was sitting in that chair, I would be defensive. I would be defensive. But in my quiet times, I knew and was able to accept the fact that some things that I was doing was wrong. So I'm about to bring our counselor on the line. Hello?
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to the Wise Wife radio program.
Well, thank you.
Folks, let me introduce Counselor Zanola Diggs, and I'm going to let her tell you about herself, but we're going to have a conversation about counseling and what some of her experiences have been. So, Zanola, would you like to introduce yourself to the crowd?
Sure. First of all, I would like to say that I am one of your best friends and your biggest fans.
Well, thank you.
And supporters, first and foremost. But I am Zanola Diggs. I am a master's level marriage and family therapist. I hail from Nashville, Tennessee, by way of Flint, Michigan. Mm-hmm. I am currently also a behavior therapist at a women's prison here in Tennessee. I have been in this area of profession over 17 years. And so I come with a life of experiences. I was personally married myself for 27 years, in a relationship with the same person for 32.
Wow.
So I believe I have something to offer here. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Nice. And so when you get people that, well, first, I'm sure that, yes, the people who are sitting on your couch, they're the ones who they say they wanted. But what has been your experience with people coming into counseling? Do you have people that are there but not really there, physically there but not really there?
Honestly, a little bit of both, Lynn. A lot of times, people come for a variety of reasons. Based on what they're seeking or what their mate is seeking. Mm-hmm. For example, I have seen, if we're talking about relationships, I have seen couples ranging from young adults who are trying to figure out, what's our next step? Mm-hmm. Should we go to the next level in our courtship? Are we ready to be engaged? Let alone married. So I'm getting a lot of that, and surprisingly, the young men are initiating it. So,
interesting.
That's a big round of applause.
It is, because I think the prevailing thought process is that men tend to be more hesitant about going into therapy. So that's encouraging to hear. Very encouraging to hear.
And then I have, the couples who are, this is what we need to do in order to get married. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. Or someone has issued an ultimatum, as the final straw. And then we have people who are just doing that, 3,000-mile checkup. Are mm-hmm. we okay? Are we on the right path? Or we want to make sure that we are. And so I think one of the stigmas, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but one of the stereotypes and stigmas is if you come to therapy, then something must be wrong. But sometimes people come because something is right and they want to keep it right.
That's good. That's good. And, one of the other attitudes that I've seen is, okay, in this marriage, if you can just fix him or fix her, then everything would be fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, to some extent, that's true. But what they have to what the other person who's saying that is, have to keep in mind is that we both have to get right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we both have to get right. Or we both have to just come to grips with some things that may not be going so well, mm-hmm. or give up some selfishness, to give up some control. And when I say give up, I don't mean as if you're losing anything, because when you're in a relationship, sometimes, the question that I ask is, what are you willing to give up to get what you want?
What are you willing to give up to get what
to
you want.
get
I like that.
what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily a detriment. It's not like you're losing anything. And actually, it's a win-win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it takes a mature mind, though, to grasp that. So,
yeah.
but I think we have to change that mindset, is that when you're in a relationship, no one loses when you're seeking to do the right thing.
Mm. You know, you hit on something, and I'm just thinking about this. My belief is that a lot of times people need time on the couch to work out some jacked up thinking that maybe they grew up with. So, you know, think about it. What if you came from a family of generational curses? And to give you an example, a generational curse, and I think about this, it's like, what has kind of even been passed down? I think about a young man I ran across. He was a serial cheater. His dad was a serial cheater. And that was one of the reasons that his marriage did not survive, because he was a serial cheater. So a person really has to come to the couch willing to work some stuff out.
Right. In the therapy world, or in the psychology world, or in the social work world, I should say, we call those ACEs, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And what we know better as generational curses. But, you know, there's some truth to, you know, the way that you grow up is the way that you will live out your adulthood. And that could, you know, whether those were negative experiences or whether they were very positive experiences, you are molded by how you were raised.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of truth to that, And so we could just do a show just on that.
I know. When I think about, I've heard this so many times, women who say, you know, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, domineering women. You know, they may have ended up single because maybe their husband died or they were divorced, but they grew up with the example of a domineering woman. And with that comes because listen, as women, we already have a tongue. That's just what we're gifted with, gifted or cursed with. But there's no way that you can keep that up and talk to your man any old kind of way. It just doesn't work that way.
And we do it consciously and we do it subconsciously. You know, the things that go on in our relationships are apparent and they're not so apparent. And so one of the things that I would challenge anyone to do is go back as far as you can. Go back as far as you can in your life and in the relationships in your life. Who was your grandmother married to? Who was your great grandmother married to? And if you know anything about those relationships, what were those relationships like? Who were the children? Who were the children's children? What happened between the children? Were there abortions? Were there divorces? Were there what is the word? I'm losing my train of thought here. But you know, what were the struggles? That happened even a long time ago. And even many of them things that you haven't even thought about in years. And once you start putting those things to paper and start drawing those things out, you'll start seeing patterns. You know, and you may not even realize, oh, this is why I do that, or this is why I think the way that I do, or you know, and some things are genetic, believe it or not. And so we just have to, you know, go back and dig within ourselves first.
Absolutely.
Put our mask on first and see, you know, where did I come from? You know, and how and where I came from will let you see where you ended up.
And that's what I referred to this earlier. Are you willing to be straight up? Are you willing to be naked, even if it's just with yourself? You know, your spouse is secondary, but are you willing to speak up to what the truth really is? So, some may and some may not. So what do you say to the person? I don't want nobody in my business. I can't. Jesus. What do you say about that type of thinking or that line of thinking?
Well, let me tell you something. I have to take a step back just a little bit, and I don't want to make this stereotypical, but since we are African American here tonight, talking on woman to woman, a lot of the things that we've learned is, from African American culture, what goes on in this house
Stays in this house. Oh my
stays in this
goodness.
house. You don't go tell everybody all your business.
Yeah.
Well, look at it this way. When you go to the doctor, to your MD,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a pain, and he asks you to disrobe and put that gown on,
Mm-hmm.
Your business is under that robe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to expose some things in order to get to the symptom, or to get to the hurt, or get to the wound.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And so we have to look at mental health, not so much as someone getting in your business. I'm not ambulance chasing. I'm not looking to get in anybody's business. But what I am doing is to help you work out your business.
Yeah.
Your business is still your business, whether, and then, when you go to someone professional, we can't tell your business. Professionally, it's HIPAA and everything else. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes we have to lay aside some of those old ways we always have to lay aside all those old ways of thinking if we're going to get healed. No one gets healed by keeping all their clothes on. The operation isn't done when you're fully dressed.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So you have to, lay aside some layers in order to get to the heart of the issue, the root of the problem.
Yeah, I like that. One of the questions that came in, and I'll answer it now. I'll also see if you want to add into it. But my wife refuses to go to counseling. They said, listen, they're going to stay together for the sake of their children, but counseling is off the table. So what is your advice to this spouse? Because it could be a man or a woman, but what is your advice to this person? And the first thing I would say is that if you have made the choice to stay together for your children, that is a worthy choice, because you are now responsible for other human beings. And I even though for a short period of time, I was a single parent, but I believe that a mother and a father raising their children is a good thing. And so I don't look down on that choice. But the only advice I would give is to create a peaceful home for your children. So peaceful that if you were sitting across from your child and they're an adult at this point, and you felt like you wanted to share that your marriage wasn't happy, like, really? I didn't know that. So you have to create a peaceful home for your children. No chaos, no constant arguing. So what else would you add to that person whose spouse refuses to go to counseling?
Well, you given me a couple of layers here. And that first layer I like to uncover is when it gets to the point where you feel like you even need counseling and the spouse refuses to come, someone needs to come.
Yeah.
And it may not be the person who's refusing. It may be the one who's willing to go. And so, there's two people in a relationship. And I think that, I firmly believe that we have to put our own mask on first. Because, children cannot take care of themselves. You and I had this discussion recently, talking about, grown people do what grown people do, but children rely on their parents. And they rely on healthy parents. They rely on mature parents. They rely on mentally stable parents. And so for the person who refuses to go, okay, fine. That's the decision you've made. But as for me individually, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be healthy and to model health, in this family or in this marriage. And this may be unpopular to say, but I will say it. Sometimes you just have to understand that inevitably every relationship will not work.
Yeah.
But you will never unparent a child.
That's good. That's good.
You will never unparent a child. And so being in a relationship for the sake of the children may not always be the wise choice if you're dying in the relationship, because children are a lot more, or young adults rather, are a lot more wise and mature than we think. And
Yes,
they're getting their cues from us.
they
So if
are.
I can be healthy across the street, and still
Mm-hmm.
show you that I love you, and sometimes even other spouse may be healthier without you,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what we have decided that it's going to be, or what it needs to be in order for us to be good parents,
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of the children, then that would be the road that I would suggest taking, more
Yes,
so than being in the house and being toxic parents for the sake of the children.
absolutely. That's why I said avoid chaos. And here's the thing, people you
Mhm.
have the best intentions, but drama does ensue. It really, it can
Mhm.
become a part of it, but you have to really be mindful. And this is something that I don't have the right answer to it, but when
Mhm.
when I was younger, I was more emotionally driven because
Mhm.
emotions are not facts. They are not. And your emotions can have you doing all kinds. Think back on the craziest stuff that you've done. And that's very likely was driven by emotion.
By emotion, right?
And so
But there's
for,
also
Mhm.
emotional intelligence that has to ensue as
Mhm.
well.
Yes,
And every decision does not have to be made on a whim.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
you can take time to think through this thing, but
Hmm.
that takes intelligence, that takes self-control and discipline to be able to get to the point where you say, okay, just because you talked about my mama, or or just because you spent all the money, or just because you did that, I don't have to act right now. Let
Hmm.
me think this thing through, because anyone who's been in a relationship, you can play that scenario out in your head. I'm going to say this, and then she's going to say that, or I'm going to do this, and then he's going to do that. I know exactly how this is going to go.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
you have more control over the outcome than you realize if you
Hmm.
would just take a moment to be intelligent.
Absolutely. So when I was talking about when I was married the first time, I was in my 20s when I met my first husband. And when I think and go back over, some of the arguments I've even had in my second marriage, if I could go back in time. So I want you to think,
Mm-hmm.
because I know you've been married for a long time, you've experienced divorce. What if you had the opportunity to go back to your younger self? What pieces of advice would you give your younger self?
Have some vision.
Ciao.
Have some vision
Yeah.
for myself. Have a self plan.
Mm,
Because things are not going to go as we plan
right.
sometimes. And one of the things we always say, show your plan to God and watch him laugh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you have to have some goals for yourself, before you jump into something, wanting someone else to, and I'm doing air quotes,
Mm-hmm.
complete me.
Yeah.
You have to be a complete person even before you get in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So for
Absolutely.
me personally, if I can look back on my 29-year-old self
Mm-hmm.
who was getting married for the first time, I would have said, and the only time I believe, but I would say, girl, grow up,
Yeah.
have some vision, accomplish some goals, and don't wait for anyone else to put the period behind your own sentences.
Yeah. I think it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to go back, one of the pieces of advice I would give my younger self, being a young married person, and I didn't do
Mm-hmm.
this, to find an accountability couple.
Yeah.
Finding an accountability couple, someone that you can talk to. You have to be very selective, because it can't be that person or that friend that co-signs everything you do. Even if
Oh,
you're doing something
no.
stupid, they're like, yeah, I mean, no, you need someone who can be
Mm-hmm.
really neutral. And as a couple, just some people to walk alongside you. That's what I
And
was
just say,
missing.
that's wrong. Go home.
Yes.
Stop
No,
it.
you're not staying here. I'm
Turn
gonna
that
need you to
off.
go home.
You know,
Yes.
you know, and not be afraid, of a relationship ending, because of it. Because, of course, true friends are not going to end over truth. It may it
Mm-hmm.
may it may hurt a little bit. It may
Yeah.
sting a little bit, but at the end of the day, those are the people who love you. Those are the
Yes.
people who have your best interest in mind. And I do have to say, just because it looks great on the outside does not mean that it's great on the inside. So do your, do your homework and approach that even with your eyes open to see if this is really what I want to model, or is it what you can also learn from people whose lives are a mess, So,
Yes. Some people's example may be to show you what you shouldn't do, and what you
not do.
absolutely, and what you said in there is, I certainly think it's applicable for folks that are dating, that you do need to date someone for a period of time so that you can really see, go through some seasons with them, so you can really see, because you can't hold up this fake vision for long. It's going to come crumbling down at some point. So you do need to date someone for a period of time.
Right. Have you seen every emotion? Have you seen them angry? Have you seen
Yes.
Have you seen them with their parents? Have you seen them with their children? Have you, hey, how do they manage money? How do they handle their children? How do they handle their, so try as much as possible. Have you witnessed every emotion, every situation with this person?
Absolutely.
To really get a good grasp of not being surprised when the day comes.
One of the other things I didn't do in my first marriage, we went to a counselor once. It wasn't a fit. And then I never went back. And so it was only until later in life I recognized that you have to be willing to try more than one person, because there's not always a fit. Counselors are people. And, I always call that square peg, square hole. Sometimes it's square peg, round hole. We just don't click. So you need to go back to the drawing board. If I had known better, I would have stuck with it and not just given it one try.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever bought a car?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So when you went to buy your car, did you buy the first one you saw in the lot, or did you shop around?
I shopped around.
All right. You picked some tires. You wanted to see if it had all the bells and whistles that you wanted. Was it loaded or was it not loaded? Did it have power? Did it not have power? And the reason I say that, Lynn, is because people spend more time buying cars than they do shopping for me.
Oof.
And
that's
I'm not
a big
saying,
one.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But, just checking things out.
Absolutely.
Them for a test drive. See how they handle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
what's the navigation system like?
Right.
And so, so those are some of the same principles we could apply to our relationship. How much mileage am I really going to get out of this?
You're right. You're right. So when people are shopping for counselors, sometimes I get a bit confused about those letters that are behind their names. What are some of the top ones, and what do they mean, those letters behind? Like, what are the letters behind your name?
Okay, the letters behind my name is MMFT, which stands for Masters of Marriage and Family Therapists.
Okay, MMFT. Okay.
MMFT, Masters of Marriage and Family Therapy, And then you have LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist, which is the only difference is that the licensed person took one more exam and passed it.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Then you have your LPCs, who are your licensed professional counselors. You have LCSWs, who are licensed clinical social workers. And so in the alphabet goes, can go on and on. But for the most part, if you're looking for a therapist, you won't go wrong with a MMFT, which is, of course, that's me, or an LMFT. You're looking for the MFT part, which is marriage and family therapist, or an LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor. And there is a difference between a therapist and a counselor. I don't think people understand that. A counselor is someone that will sit down with you and help, pretty much the same thing a therapist does. But a counselor will sit down and help you work through your issues, just like talking to a wise woman or a wise man. But then your therapist will help you work through exercises, will help you dig deeper into the mental health issues or behavior issues that you're going through, as well as just giving you advice.
Understood. Understood. I like
Mhm.
that. I do want to answer because we're winding down, and I want to get. There was a question that came up in the chat, and it was essentially, how do you organically create a peaceful space? And I'm going to answer that really quickly, and that
Mhm.
is that you need to look at your home as the haven. It is the haven for your children. It's the haven for your spouse. You don't want your spouse sitting in the car like, oh God, I got to go in
Mhm.
here. So whatever
Mhm.
you have to bring in order to keep peace in your house, even if you
Mhm.
all are having issues. And this is big, again, because you really have to learn a lot of self-control to not show that you're really angry. And keep in mind, with your kids, more is caught than is taught. So
Mhm.
that's a big deal. So just do your best to create the most peaceful environment in your home. Um,
Absolutely.
yes. So we're winding down, and I certainly will take some additional questions, but I want to, one, thank Zanola for being here. And we're going to have you
You're
hang on
welcome.
just in case there are a couple of questions that come up in the chat. But,
Okay.
folks, we will be here on next week, same time, same place. And next week, we're going to discuss a couple things that were really pivotal, and maybe they will be pivotal as well for you. But the man and the woman's role in marriage. I'm telling you,
Can I
when I,
come back?
yes, absolutely. I'm telling you, when I first heard that when I was a young woman, I was bowled over because I'd never heard that. I'd never
Yeah.
examined that or studied that. So that's huge. So we're
Mhm.
going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the concept and the principle of radical honesty. Remember when Zanola was talking about just sitting on the couch, that, or even the fact that you can't have surgery if you don't take off your clothes. So
Mhm.
likewise, there's this principle of radical honesty. So when you have these marriages where you're like, I don't know how I can talk to him. I can't say, because you have to be able to say the hard things. You have to.
Yeah. But you
So
also have to be able to create that safe space in order to do that as well, though.
this is true. That's a whole
Mhm.
nother issue, because if you don't feel
Mhm.
safe, if you have been used to perhaps revealing some things and then it gets thrown back in your face, then you're thinking, okay, that's the last thing I'm
Mhm.
going to do. So
Mhm.
yes, so that's safety. How do you create the safety so that you can then be radically honest with your spouse? And
Right.
then I'm going to give you this last question. This one, I'm going to tackle this next week. So this is someone who has been married for over 15 years, and my wife is going through menopause, and she is not at all interested in having sex. She'll say she'll have it, well, she'll do it, but then she never gets around to it. So I'm really thinking about finding somebody else. I'm thinking about
Mm.
just keeping a secret. I'm gonna go get me a little side piece, or should I just come out and ask her, hey, listen, can I find someone to have sex with me? So come back
Mm.
next week because we're going to answer that one.
That's loaded.
Ooh, it's loaded. It's so loaded, but it's good stuff. These are the hard things of marriage. And I
Mhm.
also want to share with the folks that are in the Chicagoland area that we are partnering with Dan Ministries and Beyond Counseling. They can be reached, and I'll drop this in the chat. They can be reached at 773-366-3437. I'll repeat that, but y'all get some help. 773-366-3437. And then if you have a small business, know that you can advertise on this show. We do have advertising opportunities. You can send a request to lynn@lynnsharif.com, lynn@lynnsharif.com, and we will send you a media package. I can also record your commercial too. So if you want to learn more about that, just go to lynnsharif.com and we can take a look at that. And if you would like to partner with me in helping your marriage, you can go to lynnthewisewife.com. lynnthewisewife.com if you want to talk about your marriage. If you want to talk about advertising, you can check out my website at lynnsharif.com. And if you want to give me a question to cover on a show, definitely email me at lynn@lynnsharif.com. I would also love for you to drop in the chat if there's some subjects that you want to talk about. I absolutely want to hear about those because I want to tackle all the good stuff, all the good stuff. So Zanola, do you have any closing comments for the folks here?
Well, first of all, I would say God always works.
Yes, he does.
And,
Never
and if
fails.
you keep him first in your marriage, and there is truth to the couple that prays together, stays together, or have a much better chance on doing so.
Absolutely. That is so true. I love it. Thank you so much for joining. And folks who have joined us, I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again on next week.
God bless.
God bless.